When Nique came to speak in court, what used to be a long fight in Hollywood suddenly became a big moment in a real trial. She talked about Diddy, Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, and Bishop T.D. Jakes in a way that made the whole courtroom go quiet. Day 6 of Diddy's trial started like normal, with reporters rushing in, whispering, and wondering what shocking news would come next. Nique brought papers, proof, audio clips, and facts that made people listen closely. For the first time, she was able to say the truth under oath, the same truth she had been talking about for years. What she said changed how people looked at the trial. Even before the courtroom doors opened, the room was already full. Reporters were standing in the hall, ready for big news. But no one expected what was about to happen. Nique, who won an Oscar and is known for speaking out against Hollywood, walked in quietly but confidently through a side door. Her name wasn't on the witness list, so no one expected her. But as soon as she sat down to speak, everything felt different. Diddy, wearing a dark suit, looked nervous and leaned over to whisper something to his lawyer. A courtroom artist noticed his calm face changed a little. His eye twitched and his jaw got tight. Nique sat up straight and said clearly, "I was asked to tell the truth, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." For years, she had warned people about the secrets hiding behind Hollywood's shiny image, and how Tyler Perry and Oprah had pushed her out of work. The judge allowed her to read from a timeline she had prepared that detailed her personal interactions with the people now circling this trial like vultures, including the precise dates of meetings, phone calls, broken promises, and offers made in back rooms under the false pretenses that Winfrey and Lee Daniels laughed it off and said she was angry that she was overreacting. However, now that she was sitting under oath in a federal courtroom, those same warnings were being taken very seriously. Under the guise of opportunity, prosecutors nodded along with some references to Cassie Ventura's previous testimony, and suddenly the trial was about more than just Diddy. Nique's second statement, which was directed at Tyler Perry rather than Diddy directly, landed like a missile. She detailed a private phone conversation she had with Perry in 2018, in which he acknowledged that her expulsion from Hollywood had been unfair. "He told me he was wrong, eh?" When asked who he was referring to, Nique looked straight at the jury and said, "Puff, that's who he was worried about, Puff Daddy Diddy, whatever you want to call him." Even the prosecution team gasped when he testified that he would issue a public apology, but he never did. Instead, she claims Perry told her that if he did, it would blow back on people who weren't ready to be exposed. The judge permitted the transcript, which showed Perry telling her, "There are things going on that I can't be connected to publicly. We've all seen things at Puff's parties that we're not supposed to talk about." The transcript further stated that Perry told her he couldn't risk it because there were too many people tied to too many NDAs. The chilling realization that several Hollywood elites may have known what was happening at Diddy's events and remained silent to protect their own brands was what made this moment so powerful. Diddy's defense team immediately objected, claiming that Nique's testimony was speculative, but the prosecution successfully argued that it provided necessary context about Diddy's events. Then came the moment that really made people pay attention. Nique took a deep breath, adjusted her microphone, and said the words that would make headlines by the end of the hour. "I've been to one of Diddy's parties and I left because I saw something I wasn't supposed to." She testified that in 2006, she received an invitation to a private gathering in Los Angeles, which she said was arranged through A. When she arrived at a huge estate in the Hollywood Hills, a friend, a fellow actor, and she were told it was exclusive and networking gold. The valet took her phone, and she was led inside, where candles were lit, R&B music was playing softly, and a succession of men and women were led into back rooms. I recall one of Did's assistants saying, "It's all about experience here, you're safe if you sign." The ND. She didn't sign, and she never returned. Rumors circulated that she said her phone stopped ringing for big roles, invitations to film festivals dried up, and she heard from a producer that she was being difficult. However, she never forgot that night and always suspected that her departure had made her a liability. The prosecution asked her if she thought this was a common occurrence at Diddy's events. Nodded, "I believe it was planned as a system, and when I didn't comply, I was cut off." Her testimony echoed Cassie Ventura's and others' descriptions of candlelit rooms, camera setups, experiences with hired escorts, and opulent hotels masquerading as networking havens, but what really stood out in Monique's account was her perspective as a well-respected actress who entered on her own terms and left with her career. Slowly collapsing behind her, Monique responded without hesitation when the prosecution asked if she thought Tyler Perry had actively protected Diddy's image. "Yes," she said, "and I think it was a well-planned and coordinated attempt to keep things quiet." She brought up a now-famous moment that many people saw on social media. Tyler Perry entering Bishop T.D. Jakes' megachurch and writing $1 million check in front of the entire congregation. "People saw it as a blessing," Monique said of the congregation, "but I saw a transaction," she added. "That donation wasn't just charity, it was damage control." The church serves as a shield, and individuals like Diddy utilize it to form alliances that make them appear untouchable. Courtroom commotion began, and the judge even looked up to see the jurors scrawling frantically as the Monique stated that at about the same time as, "I knew at the time that people were being paid to keep quiet about Perry's church donation and that the $1 million wasn't just for Jakes, it was for peace and silence." The prosecution presented pictures that showed Perry and Diddy together at a BET event a few weeks after the donation, arms around each other, smiling broadly as if the world wasn't circling with. At this point in her testimony, the courtroom became silent. Monique reached into her bag and said, "You see, I'm not afraid of being blackballed anymore. I've been through it, and let me tell you something, silence is the most expensive price any of us pay, and we've all paid it." The accusations painted a picture that supported Monique's claim that the entertainment industry didn't just protect Diddy but elevated him. "This is the call," she added, pulling out a written transcript, where Tyler Perry acknowledged he was mistaken. Whispers of gasps. For years, Monique had claimed that Tyler Perry had privately expressed regret for how she had been treated following the precious fallout, but now she was stating it under oath with a transcript to support it. "I had recorded the exchange, and he was aware of what I had told him." According to the transcript, Perry states, "I know I messed up. You were never difficult, you just didn't want to work for free. I should have said that publicly." He was okay with it. She gave the papers to the bailiff, who then gave them to the judge. The judge read the top lines and then nodded for the prosecution to proceed. He then allegedly turns around and tells Monique, "But I can't go public." Prosecutors used Puff's names already wrapped up in too much to explain how Hollywood elites, even those with impeccable reputations, were terrified of the fallout if Diddy's secrets were revealed. Monique added that if Puff went down, many people would be going with him, including those who sign checks and fund movies. This portion of her testimony confirmed what former bodyguard Gene Deal and even Christian Keys had hinted at regarding Diddy's web. The judge decided that the transcript was admissible, which was a huge win for the prosecution. Diddy's lawyers appeared visibly shaken. A friendly phone call had just become federal evidence, and then a name that hadn't been mentioned in this case appeared. It wasn't just about personal power, it was institutional. Monique. His voice became more emotional. "He had the opportunity to clear my name, but he didn't because he was protecting something bigger than me, something darker than anyone wants to admit." Trial thus far, but which immediately sent shockwaves through the room. Oprah Winfrey. Monique didn't bring her up casually. She brought up a point in 2010 when I told Oprah about having been abused as a child by my brother. She promised not to take advantage of it, but she did, putting my brother on her show shortly after I declined the valuable press tour. The courtroom was unsure of how to handle that, and Monique wasn't finished. "She deceived me, and when I questioned why, she claimed it was business, but I knew they were attempting to silence me." She then connected Oprah, Perry, and Diddy by pointing out that they both use NDAs, PR crisis teams, and mutual handlers. They all have the same people cleaning up the mess she testified about. "I know this because one of those PR representatives unintentionally sent me a chain of emails with my name, Puff's name, and Tyler's name in the subject line." The judge reviewed a redacted copy of the email she gave him, which was about how to handle optics. However, the message was clear. The power structure wasn't just protecting Diddy, it was coordinated, people signed non-disclosure agreements, people were paid off, and careers were either built or buried depending on who cooperated. Nique, sitting under oath, called it out for what it was: a silence machine designed to silence anyone who asked questions, and the jury watched as. When the court reconvened after a brief break, Nique did something no one had anticipated. She took a deep breath and said calmly, "Now let's talk about the list." She closed her binder, her voice never cracked, and she wasn't rattled. She didn't need to be, because for the first time she wasn't just telling her story, she was testifying. The prosecution leaned in eagerly to speak as the room fell hushed once more. "There is a list in. The list of people you don't speak against in Hollywood isn't written down, but everyone knows it exists. Oprah practically created it, explaining that it was an invisible boundary rather than a written document. The moment you criticized one of these people, even if you had proof, you were immediately labeled difficult, crazy, or worse, dangerous to the industry," Nique said. "How many people worked with Diddy, Tyler, and Oprah and then suddenly disappeared?" she asked, mentioning names without making accusations but with context. Doesn't it seem odd that she found herself on the other side of that boundary in 2010 and has been battling her way back ever since? She mentioned performers who had one popular show, one award season buzz, and then disappeared. Some of them said they didn't play the game. And some of them saw things that they were never supposed to see, she remarked, lowering her voice. Although she didn't say it was Tyler Perry, the court allowed her to read a brief statement from a former actor who had it redacted for protection. The statement detailed a retreat hosted by a powerful male filmmaker where phones were taken, contracts were signed, and strange rituals were observed. When asked directly if she thought Diddy was involved in her career being ruined, Nique nodded. The judge let the jury sit with the uneasiness, reminding them that these were accusations, but Nique's message was clear. The industry wasn't protecting art, it was protecting secrets, and the cost of speaking the truth is that they'll take your career, your reputation, your peace, and leave you to explain to the world why your phone never rings again. Yes, initially not, but ultimately yes. And I didn't realize how deep it went until years later. She explained that after the Precious campaign fallout, when the blackballing began, she received a call from a junior executive who had worked at Revolt TV, Diddy's media company. He told me, and I quote, "You rubbed the wrong people. It's not just about Tyler and Oprah." Puff dislikes. The court leaned in technique when the executive testified that Perry's team had approached Diddy about future project partnerships. The deal was straightforward. She claimed that Perry and Diddy had met behind closed doors on several occasions, which she later learned about through mutual contacts. During those meetings, they discussed my name, not as a talent but as a problem. The first time the court saw a direct digital link between the two women's reputations being carefully manipulated simultaneously, the prosecution presented emails between a PR firm hired by both Revolt and Tyler Perry Studios discussing managing narratives around Nique and Cassie Ventura. When the moment hit hard, Nique continued to say she thought her difficult label was intentionally passed around, and they used that word like a virus infecting one casting director with. She said something that few people in Hollywood ever say under oath: "I wasn't blackballed, but I was whiteballed by black people who looked like me and people who feared losing their own spot more than they cared about doing right." It quickly spreads to everyone, and before long, your name appears in a room, and they already have a reason to say no. "I didn't want to be here," Nique said, her voice steady but exhausted, "but I had to be because of what they did to me." Cassie described how she was called by the prosecution 2 months earlier and at first stated, "No, I wasn't going to relive it." She also claimed that what they're doing to young women and men right now won't end unless someone says it with a microphone louder than theirs. "I wasn't going to reveal my family, my trauma, or my pain once more," she added, "but then I saw the Prince recording, Diddy yelling in court, and Cassie sobbing on the witness stand. I heard my grandmother's voice say, 'Baby, don't let them write your story without you in the room.'" Her last minutes on the stand were heartbreaking, and the prosecution asked, "In your opinion, Miss Jackson, what was the root cause of this entire system of silence?" She described her decision to testify as a moment of spiritual clarity at that point. Nique replied, "Everyone in this industry is afraid of losing a job, a deal, or their relevance because people like Puff, Tyler, and yes, Oprah have made it very expensive to do so." She turned to face Diddy and said softly, "You thought nobody would talk, that you built an empire strong enough to silence everybody, but now you're sitting in silence, and I hope you finally hear us." she said as she left the courtroom. Reporters said Diddy was visibly shaken, his hands trembled, and his lawyer whispered angrily. The gallery erupted, not with noise, but with energy. It was the moment when the courtroom felt the tide shift, and the courtroom had been on edge for days, but no one was listening. As anticipated, Nique locked eyes with the defense and whispered the name that hadn't been officially spoken once in the previous 5 days: Tyler Perry. It wasn't a scream or a dramatic moment. Rather, it was quiet control, like someone finally taking a loaded gun out of a locked drawer. You want to talk about power and silence, so ask Mr. Perry why I was blackballed after refusing to work for free, and then notice who was standing next to him. He never did anything to help me, but he made calls to make sure no one else would either. Ask the producers, ask the agents, ask Lee Daniels, I've got the call logs. The gallery gasped at every event, and the courtroom initially appeared perplexed because Tyler Perry wasn't on trial and his name wasn't in the indictment. However, Nique's implication wasn't about legality, but rather about culture and the system about who protected whom. I know who was at the parties, which NDAs were enforced, and I've seen people sign them in front of me. I was told not to speak, and when I did, I was told, be grateful you're lucky to be here. The defense objected right away, but it was too late because the jury had already heard the name of a prominent Hollywood figure who many thought had an untouchable method. She continued, I have audio of a phone call in which Tyler apologized for everything and admitted that he was wrong, but he refused to go public, saying it would ruin everything. She looked straight ahead and said, I'm done protecting men who never protected me. That one statement struck a deeper chord than any exhibit the courtroom had seen that week, and suddenly, this wasn't just about Diddy, but about the entire infrastructure of. Jurors were looking beyond Diddy for the first time throughout the trial when they pointed the finger at Hollywood, not only Diddy, for the authority that allowed him to operate unchecked. The man seated at the table of defense. They were examining all those who provided assistance.